we were before. Let me go back on to the locals page and see if where. All right, so this is the new one. Okay, so we're back. Well, it doesn't seem as if it's doing anything at all. Okay, here we go. All right, so okay, so now I think this is yeah, this I think is better, which was previously we weren't getting anywhere. But I think this you know I don't know what's behind it. I suspect, but I'm still not getting anything from. Yeah, Robert, I can see and hear you. That's good, but we're still not getting anywhere with YouTube. Maybe we'll get somewhere with that. But again, I think the YouTube. I think that maybe something is going wrong with Rumble. Maybe there's an overload of people, you know, in anticipation of the debate, and somehow Rumble is unable to cope with the. Yeah, let's see again. Okay. No, and it looks like no, we managed to do this. Okay. So anyway, George, back on deck. Yes, Sonu, thank you very much. So I didn't see all of the questions that were asked. I mean, if you can copy and paste them, and then so I can then go back and answer. I mean, I began answering the question of Biden's plan, why Biden was hanging on in order to prevent Hillary from making a comeback. I don't know. To be honest, you can see me on YouTube. That's good. Oh, that's it. Okay, I can see now there is a presence on YouTube. I don't know. I think that there was a problem with Rumble, and I think it's just simply maybe there's just because of the debate, there's just an overload of people. So. So anyway, thank you. Thank you for anyone who's joined me. So I don't know whether that was Biden's motivation to try to keep Hillary out. I don't know whether he has particularly strong feelings on the question of Hillary Clinton. Because after all, he made way for her. He stepped aside for her in 2016, and then she sort of stepped aside in 2020. Didn't run. So I don't know whether there's any any particular feeling on his part that he has to stay just in order to keep Hillary out. There was an interesting article today in Axios, which suggested, and that Michelle Obama really detests Biden, and so while Barack is doing his dutiful party thing, which is you're supposed to do. You're in the party. You're supposed to help out the nominee of your party. She takes no part in any of those activities. She doesn't do any campaigning on behalf of Biden. And according to this article in Axios, she has come to detest Biden on account of her being a close friend of Hunter's first wife. I can't remember her name. I think Kathleen. I think yeah, Kathleen. I think was her name. And Michelle apparently was really angry with the way Hunter had treated her friend, namely Hunter's first wife, particularly his use of drugs and his his screwing around and everything else. So she really just does not like Biden, and then the whole issue of Hunter then screwing around with Bo's, his late brother's widow. I think that upset both of the Obamas. They didn't they didn't like that. And apparently, I mean, and this Axios article kind of quotes Barack saying, "Well, that's some weird shit that goes on in that family." And that was even before Ashley Biden's the discovery of Ashley Biden's diary and the story of her taking showers with her father, which she deemed, even as somebody young, she deemed as not exactly appropriate. So there's no love lost between the Obamas and the Bidens. However, Obama does the dutiful thing you're supposed to as as former president. You're supposed to campaign for the current president. But Michelle refuses to do it, and you have to think. I mean, Biden is quite a creepy character, always has been, and he, the sleaze and the corruption that he exudes, all of which was known by Obama. I mean, Obama knew all about what the Biden family. I mean, that basically it was just simply a gravy train and a global influence peddling operation. So Barack, as president, knew exactly what the Biden family was doing, and I think that's probably. I think it's one of the reasons why he didn't want Biden as president. On the other hand, it's hard to differentiate between the Biden sleaze operation and the Clinton sleaze operation. I mean, they seem both exactly the same. They're both essentially trading their name for cash. I mean, they're basically saying, given their prominence, given their access to wealthy and important people, hey, just pay me. So, yeah, here I am, I'm for hire. Just I have the name, just pay me. And I think that was both the Clinton operation and the Biden. So, if you're Obama and you're thinking, well, whom do I prefer in 2016, which is either Hillary Clinton or Biden, I don't know how you would differentiate. I mean, they're both utterly disgusting. It just in terms of the way they rake in the cash. So it's a I mean, look, I mean, Obama, I mean, obviously is a fairly inconsequential figure. And I remember back in 2008, people thought he was a substantial person. Naively, people just wanted to believe what they wanted to believe. But they thought that somehow he's a real person, and that once he leaves office, he's going to devote himself to doing good things, good works. Like Jimmy Carter, devoted himself to doing good works after he left office. But that's in fact not what Barack Obama did. He too has cashed in big time, and didn't do the sort of thing that ex-presidents sort of have like being peacemakers or negotiators, or all of the kind of elder statesmen, wise men, and so on. No, no, it's just, like, hey, where's the cash? So I mean, all of them are really quite disgusting. Having said that, I mean, I think that I stand by what I think, which is that if Biden is re-elected in November, he doesn't look to me like he's in any mental and physical shape to carry on for another 4 years. So I do think that he will step aside. How soon after the election, I don't know, but he will step aside in favor of Harris. And yeah. But as for the debate tonight, it's going to work against Trump, because Fake Tapper and Dana Bash will ask questions that they know will interest them, of course, as liberals in good standing, but it can be calculated to put Trump on the defensive, make him look bad, and that Biden can use to bash Trump. So I'm sure they're going to ask, first question, first out of the gate, first question, Mr. Trump, will you accept the election outcome, whether you win or lose? That'll be the first question. Will you accept the election count, whether you win or lose? And then, or that, of course, will give Biden an opportunity to say, well, this man doesn't respect democracy, and he's a threat to democracy. He doesn't respect the Constitution. Blah 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 blah. Next question will be, Mr. Trump, do you accept that you lost the 2020 election? And then again, Trump will start talking about the everything that went wrong in 2020, and then it'll give Biden the opportunity to, well, that just shows this is a person who's simply unable to accept the democratic outcomes. He's unable to accept the voters' decisions. And then, of course, we can expect questions about abortion. Now, I actually think that when it comes to abortion, Trump should be able to parry that without too much difficulty, because his stance is that it's a matter for the states. So if you say it's a matter for the states, and you say, look, I'm not getting involved. It's not it's not my bailiwick. It's not a federal issue. It's a state issue. So I've made my views known. What I think about abortion. I don't think it should be. I'm against it, with the exception of the familiar three, which is a rape, incest, and the life of the mother. But that's just my view. It's a state's issue. I think that I don't think that's that works particularly against him. After all, it used to be a good way of beating Republicans, because Republicans will then keep promising that they're going to nominate someone to the Supreme Court who will get rid of Roe v. Wade, and so then and then we go to. But now that it's gone, then unless a Republican president is promising to bring in a federal ban, and Trump is not promising that. Trump has said that he's not going to push for a federal ban. Then he can parry that issue of abortion quite effectively, unless, of course, he walks into a trap. And it's possible he's going to walk into a trap, and that they're obviously are going to try and trap him by getting him to say that he might support a federal ban. But I think his answer saying, "Hey, it's a state's matter," then I think that shouldn't be too bad for him. So that'll be another question. And of course, what won't work for Biden is Israel. Now, again, Bash, Tapper, and Trump, they're ardent supporters of Israel. And so Biden will be on the defensive. He will have to say, well, why aren't you more wholeheartedly in Israel's corner? So that will work against Biden, which is why I don't think, given Tapper and Bash are supporters of Biden, I don't think they're going to play the Israel issue up very much. I think they know that it's a vulnerability for Biden and the source of strength for Trump, because hey, Trump, all in for Israel, everything for Israel. So I don't think that the Israel issue is going to come up particularly in this debate. I think they will talk about Russia and Ukraine, and I think they think they can wrong foot Trump by getting Trump to say that I'm not all in for Ukraine. I want this war to an end. Just in the same way that that repartee with Caitlin Collins when she kept insisting, "Don't you want Ukraine to win?" He said, "No, I want this war to end." So I think they're going to press that again. Don't you want Ukraine to win? And then see what he says. They're going to try and trap him into saying that, yeah, well, I'm not that interested in Ukraine winning. I'm more interested in bringing it to an end. And that means you're working for Putin. You're trying to get Putin to win. You want Russia to win. You've always been a supporter of Russia. So they're going to try and trap Trump with that, saying, hey, you're really with Russia. You want Russia to win. And so I think they're going to go for Ukraine. They think that that's a source of weakness for Trump. It isn't, of course, but they think it is. And again, if Trump doesn't handle it well, if he just simply repeats the mantra, it didn't happen on my watch. Putin was really afraid of me, and Putin is, he will be afraid of me, and and I will do such things. I will bring it to an end because, everyone is terrified of me. That's bad news, because then you're going to scare the public into thinking that Trump is ready to launch World War III. Trump needs to be the peace candidate. That's his strong suit. That's what won him the 2016 election. He is the peace candidate. So if he goes and suggests that the way he's going to bring this war to an end is by being the madman, the sort of that he's ready, ready to go to war, he's ready to use nuclear weapons to bring this war to an end, then I think that's going to work against him, because no one wants to vote for a war candidate. That's just not where the American people are. And so I think that he needs to be very careful. His best bet is what he did in 2016, when Hillary Clinton was the war hawk and he was the one who wanted to have good relations with Russia. That was his brilliant maneuver in 2016. He was never able to replicate it again. So he just did it then, but never was able to present himself again as a peace candidate. Immigration, is going to be a wash, I think, because Trump will obviously talk about the border that's out of control and so on, and all these people who have come in on Biden's watch. But then Biden is going to turn around and he's going to use the argument, however bogus, but he will use the argument, and Dana Bash and Fake Tapper will echo his argument. Hey, I offered a deal to the Republicans. I wanted to do something about the border. I offered this deal. It was a great deal. It was the toughest deal, toughest border restrictions of all time. There's never been anything as tough as what I was proposing. And, we got all these Republican senators on board, and we were ready to sign this deal. And it was you and all your your nationalist, racist friends in the House who stood in the way of a deal. So he needs to address that. He needs to deal with that issue, um, and say that it was a bogus deal. It was not. It was not a. It wasn't going to stop anything, but he has to do it. And then you got to knock off all the stuff about, hey, but I want people to come in legally, because that again is that, back in 2016, he did initially talk about legal. Oh yeah, I'm for legal immigration. I'm just against illegal immigration, but I'm all for legal immigration. And then he kind of changed his view when he realized that, if you want to win over the blue collar vote, they say, yeah, legal immigration means we're out of work. We're going to they're going to bring in people from Bangladesh, and we're supposed to train them so that they can replace us at, half our pay. And then he realizes that, the answer isn't legal immigration. The answer is zero immigration. And then that worked for him in 2016. But again, he's going back to this fake differentiation. Well, I'm just against illegal immigration, but I'm for legal immigration. No, you've got to absolutely say I'm against all immigration. Zip, zero, zilch. No one's coming in. But I don't know whether he's going to do that, because he's now thinking about all these rich donors who are giving him money. He's raising a lot of money now, particularly all these Silicon Valley types who have always been for mass immigration, legal immigration, so we can get all these cheap computer programmers working on Silicon Valley. So now that he's getting all this money from them, he's again gone back to this, his nonsensical position of legal immigration is good, and then and presenting this ridiculous, stupid argument that, the moment you have a foreign student graduates from an American university, and he seems to think just about anybody at all who's graduating from an American university, you clip a green card onto their diploma. I mean, this is terrible. So if he goes down that path, he's going to lose votes. And as I say, I tend to think this will be a good night for Biden. As we were saying the other day, Biden is nothing if not crafty. He may be, a kind of a vegetable most of the time, but they're going to prep him. They're going to pump him full of drugs. They're going to push him out. It's only 90 minutes, and he may just outsmart Trump tonight. I mean, I hope that's not what happens, but wouldn't surprise me. Anyway, let me just then go back to the locals page and then see if we can raise some of the issues. Cynthia, welcome, Cynthia. Always very grateful. Thank you for your generosity. Thank you. So Cynthia says the Aussie government required Assange to take a charter flight home, costing him $500,000, 520,000. Luckily, an anonymous Bitcoiner gave him the money to pay for that flight. Oh, that's already been paid for. Oh, that's good. I didn't realize he's already come up with the money. But I always thought they probably would come up. I mean, it's not a sum that's impossible to get. So anyway, pay for that flight, but would he have remained in Saipan until he got the money to pay for that flight? And what if he never got that money? Would he have been forced to return back to Belmarsh prison? It just seems like requiring him to take such an expensive flight back home was the government's way of trying to keep him locked up. I didn't quite understand that whole thing about why he had to pay that basically it was just a flight for him. I mean, why they couldn't put him on a regular flight? I mean, they can put him business class, along with all these all the entourage, all these Australian government officials, these lawyers, and so on. It's not like he's a a safety risk, like, it's a dangerous criminal. We can't have put a dangerous criminal on a regular flight. So I didn't quite understand why they had to charter a plane entirely for him. Why couldn't they just put him on a regular flight, business class and whatever, so that he doesn't have to intermingle with everyone else? I mean, that would still, and charge him for that, but it would still be a lot less than 520,000. I mean, it's a lot of money, but still not 520,000. As to your question, I mean, what if he doesn't pay? Well, I would imagine, even if somebody hadn't come up with the money, I mean, they would have probably figured out some way. I don't know, some kind of a payment plan. And then knowing that there are obviously many figures in the world who would come up with this money, I don't think they were going to bring him back to Belmarsh prison. What is interesting, and I don't know whether people have noticed it, which is there were conditions attached to his guilty plea. One of the conditions was that he waived his rights to making any kind of a FOIA application to find out about his arrest, the judicial decisions that we went and negotiations that took place over the years, and going all the way back to 2010, 2012. So he's given up his right to make any kind of a FOIA application to find out about everything that went on, all the discussions about him that went on within the Justice Department, within among the British authorities, and again among the Australian authorities. So that's 12, 13, 14 years of discussion. So he's waived his rights to make any kind of a FOIA request. So that was one of the conditions. The other condition is, I think, is a very interesting one, and that there was, but I don't know, many documents, many documents. I think 20,000. I don't know. They said unspecified as to what it is, but he had to make a pledge either to return these documents to the U.S. government or to destroy them. It was unspecified what were these documents, but there was a fairly extensive documents, and he indeed signed an affidavit saying, yeah, he's handed them over to the U.S. government, and or he has destroyed them. So that, of course, leads to the question: what were these documents? What was it that the U.S. government was so insistent on getting back, and or that he destroy them? Now, I think that they are about the origins of what came to be Russiagate in the United States, which is how he came by those DNC emails, because that's the issue that the U.S. government is really very embarrassed by, because that's the one that was that created the hoax, the fraud that kind of created global turmoil, the total destruction of the American political system, of this cooked up nonsensical story of Trump-Russia collusion, with Julian Assange playing a key role in this. So if you read the mainstream media today, you read the New York Times, you read the Washington Post, you read the Financial Times, they're all repeating the same thing. Julian Assange played a key role in Russian interference in the 2016 election. They all repeat this. It's a mantra. It's official history. Julian Assange played a key role in this in the 2016 election. So Assange knows very well the source of those documents. And so therefore there was always a chance, and the US government well knew, particularly Biden well knew, that that Assange, once he's free, would be able to point to all the evidence that it wasn't the Russians who delivered those emails. It was probably Seth Rich, but it wasn't the Russians. And that would be a huge, huge embarrassment to the US government. Because then it's essentially the whole thing, this whole thing hoax. All of the government agencies were in on it. Whether the Justice Department, the CIA, the FBI, Barack Obama, Biden, all were in on this absolute hoax and put out this lie that everyone is still committed to, total fraud, that Russia interfered in the 2016 election. And so they're not going to give Assange the opportunity to announce, hey, you want to see the evidence? You want me to show you how we got these emails? Here it is. So that's why it was so important for him to destroy or to hand over to the U.S. government these documents. And it's very interesting that it's unspecified what these documents were. It's a little like the raid, the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago. What were they really looking for? I think they were looking for the documents about the origins of Russiagate, of the investigation into Trump, how the whole thing had been cooked up by the FBI and CIA, long preceding that whole nonsensical story about George Papadopoulos meeting the Australian High Commissioner, and so there was that it long preceded that. But that Trump had those documents. But again, as always with Trump, he didn't declassify them as he should have done. He sat on them, and then once he was out of office, the FBI moved in to get their hands on those documents. It's not clear, I think, at the moment. It's all shrouded in mystery. Where these documents are, I'm not sure, because I'm not sure the FBI ever got their hands on those documents. So Trump may have squirreled them away somewhere else. We may yet find out about those documents. But anyway, it's looking like the whole story of Trump-Russia collusion, Putin interfering in the election and using Julian Assange in order to secure the election for Trump in 2016, this will be enshrined as official history. Fraudulent, bogus, a lie, but that was the price Assange had to pay to get his freedom. Anyway, Cynthia goes on. Assange definitely looks like he's aged a lot while in prison. Yeah, I agree with you. I think there were some people who were saying on our board, on the locals board, I think Takfiri, saying that he looks good. I don't see it that way. I don't see that he was looking good. I think he has aged a lot. His face has also become very puffy. Now, if your face gets puffy, probably he's getting a very bad diet in prison. I mean, he's not starving. I mean, that's true. He's not starving in prison. And I don't think people starve in a British prison, but they get very bad food. I mean, the British cuisine is not famous for being good, and I'm sure the British prison cuisine is pretty terrible. I remember the school lunches that I used to have back in London. It was disgusting, and that was school lunches. And I'm sure the prison lunches are much worse than the school lunches, however bad that they were that I had. So I'm sure he had he was bad diet, and I'm sure that there are, you're in prison, there aren't that many opportunities to exercise or to have fresh air. And this went on for years and years. It's not like, oh well, it was a few months. It went on for year after year after year. He had very little by way of sort of exercise, fresh air, decent food. I mean, remember, he was stuck in that Ecuador embassy for was it 7 years. So again, he had little opportunity to exercise there. Again, little opportunity for fresh air. So yeah, I think I think he is aged. I think so. Anyway, you say it looks like he's gained a sizable amount of weight, which is likely due to him eating fatty and unhealthy prison food. Yeah, I agree. And not getting any exercise. Yeah, I agree. But the way he picked up Stella with such ease, as though she were no lighter than a feather. In fact, you think he must have been lifting quite a few weights while he was there. Yeah, I think so. Having said that, I mean, I think that he's a big man. I mean, he's which I didn't fully realize, how tall he is. I mean, he's much taller than everyone around him, and she's quite short. So all he did, I think, is something that isn't that difficult if you're tall. I mean, you can just simply lift someone off her feet. So I don't know whether that necessarily means that he's. I mean, he may well have been pumping iron. I mean, I don't know what else you do in prison. There's not a lot of other activities to do. So it's possible he did, but I don't know whether that's necessarily that required a great deal of strength. I mean, he's just very tall. If you're very tall, it's easy to lean and then just lift somebody off her feet. But yeah, that's so. I think. But we'll see. We'll see whether he has longer term. I find it hard to believe that he doesn't have long-term health effects after all these years. I mean, after the years inside the Ecuadorian embassy, after the years inside Belmarsh prison, it has to take a toll on your health. So. Danrock, thank you very much for your generosity. Says, I always thought they'd somehow throw Michelle Obama into the leadership. I don't know. I don't know whether that's really what she's into. I'm not sure she's that political. I don't know whether she's that interested in politics. Certainly, she's not that interested in the whole day-to-day grubby aspects of politics, all the working deals and having meetings and all the rest. So I had my doubts that's. I mean, she looks like somebody who enjoys the good life. The nice holidays, travel, hanging out with rich people, cocktail parties, parties in general. So I just didn't think that the sort of the grubby aspects of politics would ever particularly appeal to her. So I had my doubts that they would push to get her in. I mean, I think that it was always going to be difficult to get rid of Biden once Biden made clear that he intended to run. I mean, there's no mechanism to push aside an incumbent president. I mean, unless he really is completely mentally incompetent, and therefore they can invoke the 25th Amendment. But he was never in that condition, so I think it was just very difficult to find anyone else to replace him, and that's even if you can believe that that the others, like say Michelle or Gavin Newsom would have a better shot at winning the election than than Biden would, because Biden has been fairly successful in his career. I mean, obviously he served in Delaware for 36 years, and then he was VP on a twice successful ticket, and then in 2020. I'm not going to say he won, but I say he obviously performed pretty decently. So, if you're a Democratic Party operative, you have to come up with an alternative candidate who you believe will do better. And I don't know whether it's that easy. I mean, the Democrats don't really have much of a bench. I mean, it is quite interesting that it's hard to think of Democrats like who would if we're talking about 2028. I mean, who is a viable alternative in 2028? I mean, obviously Harris will be there, but Harris looks very unimpressive. Maybe she'll get better in the next 4 years, but at the moment she looks extremely unimpressive. Then you've got that woman in Michigan. She's again not at all appealing. I think Gavin Newsom is not appealing. You got Hochul in New York, very unappealing. It's hard to come up with a candidate in the way Democrats used to be able to say, okay, well, this looks, there's somebody who is a strong, competent, clear thinking governor or senator. I mean, it's hard to think of anyone particularly impressive. I mean, I'm sure that some of the also rans from 2020 will run again in 2028. So Amy Klobuchar I'm sure she will run again, however disastrous she was in 2020, with her Minnesota Nice routine. And of course, I mean, she was just absolutely dreadful. She had no ideas about anything other than, hey, I'm Minnesota Nice. And then, of course, as always happens when you present yourself as being nice, it turns out you are anything but nice. She was really detested by members of her staff. And then when the members of her staff went to the media and say, she's horrible, she's a really horrible person to work for, she said, yeah, that's because I'm a woman. If a woman is tough and perfectionist, then of course she's immediately, a bitch. Whereas a man, that's perfectly acceptable for a man to be demanding. No, it's unacceptable at any time to treat the people who work for you like shit. But yeah, I'm sure she'll run again. I'm sure Pete Buttigieg will run again. But it's not an impressive bench. I mean, somebody I guess could emerge in the next few years, but I doubt it. I can't think of any. Anyway, Marty says, so thank you very much, Marty. I really appreciate it. It says, good evening, George and Gagglers. 2 weeks to go until the NATO Washington summit. Any predictions? Well, I mean, they're going to try and do a fudge that will go beyond what they came up with in Vilnius. So they're going to put some mechanisms in place to get Ukraine into NATO. So they're not going to issue a formal invitation. It's just they're not, but they're going to do something. Well, there's an article today in the New York Times. Oh, we're going to set up some NATO Ukraine headquarters in Germany that will oversee NATO, the NATO mission in Ukraine. So it means, in other words, you're sort of in NATO, but you're not formally in NATO. I mean, at this stage, I don't know if people watched. It was posted by our friend Danaki on our locals board that that the David Cameron's conversation with those two Russian hoaxers. And Cameron said, "Yeah, I'm for Ukraine being in NATO, and there are a number of people like me in NATO who want Ukraine as a member." And we can guess who they are. Obviously the Baltic states, Poland. But he said, the problem is that there are those who are not happy with it. So he says, well, we just don't have a consensus as of yet. So we can have a showdown and a fight at the Washington summit, or we can just postpone it for another day. So I think they're going to postpone it for another day. They don't have the, they just don't have the consensus. If Sergeant Schultz and Macron had done better in their elections, they might have had more of a consensus, because to support the induction of Ukraine into NATO. But it's clear that the German people don't have the stomach for this. They don't want a war with Russia. Schultz knows this. I mean, irrespective of anything Annalena Baerbock says, yeah, she wants that war with Russia, she wants Ukraine in NATO, but that's not where the German people are. So they just don't have that consensus, as Cameron said. So I think they're just going to have to come up, as I say, with some formula. Yeah, we're going to have a special NATO mission, NATO Ukraine mission in Germany, which will coordinate, the NATO response to Ukraine. But I think they are going to commit themselves to escalating the arms and delivery of all sorts of things to Ukraine. There's no end in sight. I mean, that's the point. There's just no end in sight to this war. And I tend to think that there will be a Ukrainian offensive either later this year or next year. And we know that the counteroffensive, that last year, the 2023 counteroffensive, obviously didn't go well for Ukraine. Russia held on. I'm not quite sure why that's a cause for great celebration. I mean, you held on, but Russia then didn't press its advantage from the failed offensive, which is what you're supposed to do. If an offensive fails, then you press your advantage and move and press ahead with an offensive of your own. But that didn't happen. But the next Ukrainian offensive, I don't know how that's going to go. Ukraine now has stronger air power than it had then. I mean, Ukraine didn't have the air power in 2023. I think it's going to have more air power now. They're going to have more air defense systems in operation, which will help the Ukrainian air power during their offensive. So we'll see how that goes. But it may not it may not work out as well as for Russia as well as the 2023 counteroffensive. Anyway, Marty says, so happy for Julian and Stella. Yeah, I think so. I think that was very nice. Those were definitely very touching scenes. I really like Julian's father. I know there's just something about him. He's such a soft-spoken, kind of gentle, kind of dry humor person, and he's been very, very involved with his son's legal fight and everything. So it was really nice to see the two of them hugging at the airport. Anyway, Robert says, on the waterfront is ahead. I noticed that in the film vote, but I'm hoping Hoffa will pick up votes. Hoffa sounds like an interesting populist figure, willing to take on the establishment like Huey and Long. Plus, he's played by Jack Nicholson. I agree with you. I'm a little disappointed that On the Waterfront is ahead. I mean, no, I mean it's a decent enough film, but it's it's a well-known film. I mean, you always want something that's a little less well-known prevailing. Hoffa, I thought it was a pretty decent film. But I think it had too many of the Hollywood cliches. It's just when you have a kind of a big Hollywood production, it has to have the cliches, the endless reaction shots, which after a while get annoying, and but I think, I mean, it was reasonably sympathetic to Hoffa, which I think was quite a breakthrough, because Hoffa had been given a very bad press, unfairly, largely because of his tussles with Bobby Kennedy, and of course, with our liberal culture, which adores the Kennedys, everyone took the side of Bobby against Hoffa. But the interesting thing was that if you read Victor Navarsky's book, Kennedy Justice, which was really about the Bobby Kennedy Justice Department, he really details just how abusive Bobby Kennedy's Justice Department was in going after Hoffa. It absolutely, I don't know how many people it put on the case just to go after Hoffa. There was no justification for it other than Bobby's absolute loathing for Hoffa. Now, again, none of this ever seems to penetrate the idea that Bobby was an anti-establishment figure, or that Bobby was a great liberal, that Bobby was on the side of the downtrodden, that he was on the side of the working man, the ordinary people. I mean, it's a total fantasy that was built up about Bobby. I mean, we know Bobby worked on the McCarthy Committee, and then Bobby worked on the McClellan Committee. Now, the McClellan Committee went after organized labor. That's when the famous confrontation between Bobby and Hoffa took place. So again, it was union busting. That's what it was, and that's why, because somehow Bobby was very miffed by the way Hoffa treated him. So he just used the Justice Department, instead of attending to real issues, to go after Hoffa, or going after organized labor. And as I say, none of that ever damages the reputation of Bobby as this great liberal, the friend of the working man. He was anything but that. Much as, Bobby Jr. is not a friend of the working man either. Again, somebody posted on the Locals page an interview that Bobby Jr. gave the other day, and in this interview, he was boasting about how he had dinner the other night with Mike Pompeo. Now, you'd think that's not something I would boast about. And he said, "Oh yeah, you're a fantastic guy, Pompeo. He's so brilliant. He's so smart. Top of his class at Harvard, top of his class at West Point. All the stuff that you've been hearing about. Really brilliant." And then he said, "Yeah, but and he told me during dinner that his one regret was that he didn't really purge the CIA. He wanted to purge them, but he didn't purge the CIA. That." So he presents this idea of Pompeo as yet another enemy of the deep state, yet another figure who wanted to purge the CIA. He wanted to get rid of the enemies of democracy. This is the guy who plotted to assassinate Assange. We know this. He plotted to murder Assange. This is a guy who actually boasted about lying and murdering at the CIA. And this is your dinner companion. You buy into all the crap that Pompeo tells you. That's apart from anything, all the crap that you buy into with Rabbi Shmuley. So there's a kind of it's this fantasy world that's always surrounded the Kennedys. The idea that they are somehow anti-establishment and that somebody always wants to get rid of them because they threatened the power structure. Neither Jack nor Bobby ever threatened the powerful forces in the United States. Anyway, but I'd like the Hoffa film to prevail, but but it looks to me like On the Waterfront has taken a decisive lead. And I've noticed whenever we have these polls, the one that takes an early decisive lead usually prevails at the end. So anyway, so let me go back. And Marty says, the British state is over-the-top parting gift to Julian Assange. He was handcuffed, kept in a Serco van for hours, and had a large police escort with helicopters to the airport. Yeah, I read that as well. Yeah, the British, I think, come out very badly from all of this. They were only too eager to help out the Americans. I mean, this was the whole thing was outrageous from the start. They showed no real resistance to what the Americans wanted. Clearly, this was an attack on journalistic freedom. The British knew this very well, that this was an attack on journalistic freedom. And the British were more than happy to cooperate. One has to say, the Australians did very, very little until at a very late date when we have this new Australian government, this new Labour government, Anthony Albanese. And so he was making all these speeches. Well, we Australians, we really care about our citizens. We always go and fight for our people. And that's what we've always done. Any Australian who's in trouble, we go in to help out these Australians. What a load of crap. You haven't done anything all these years. So don't give us whatever you are, and you're an Australian, we're always there to help you out. Yeah, right. And particularly as Assange himself said many times that my government hasn't done anything for me, nothing. So, the whole idea that Australians are now congratulating themselves for having fought for Assange, So, and then Robert says, it seems to me that the smart thing for Trump to do would be to turn the debate into a referendum on Ukraine. Well, I think that he needs to present himself as the peace candidate. If he can do that, if he has the courage to do that and says, I will bring this war to an end, I can't let this killing to go on. But if he says, "Oh well, I was more anti-Russian than any other president, and Putin was afraid of me, and Putin will be afraid of me," if he does that, and therefore suggest that the way he's going to bring this war to an end is by threatening Russia, and it's possible that he could suggest that, then he's going to lose votes because there really isn't any stomach in America for any kind of a war with Russia. So it's a question of whether he has the courage to do it. He had the courage in 2016. He hasn't shown that kind of courage since then. So I kind of agree with you. I mean, I think Ukraine should be a very good issue for him. It's Biden's war. Biden has bungled it. This is an absolute disaster for everybody. And a smart challenger would be able to seize on the Ukraine issue and run with it to the election. But I don't know if Trump will do that. It's a little like, no, I mean, maybe that's unfair to Trump, but it kind of reminds me of Mitt Romney in 2012, when he had this glorious issue drop in his lap, which was that the U.S. ambassador was assassinated in Libya. The very Libya that Obama had intervened in, overthrown the Gaddafi government, which had been stable, not a great government, but at least it had been a stable government. Above all, it was a government in which U.S. ambassadors were safe. And then suddenly this U.S. ambassador was assassinated. This would be a glorious opportunity for a challenger to run with that run with the issue and into the election and say, it was you, Mr. President, who got America involved unnecessarily in this conflict inside Libya, and now we have a dead ambassador. We haven't had any dead ambassadors for several decades. It used to be, a regular thing. We had dead ambassadors, but we haven't had any, and now you've brought dead ambassadors back. But Romney was such an absolute dweeb, an absolutely despicable human being, who then got himself bogged down into the issue that whether you call the killers of this ambassador radical Islamic terrorists. I mean, that was always, did you call them radical Islamic terrorists? It was, it's just awful. And he blew it. A chance like that just comes and goes. And unless you know what to do with it, it shows idiot. It's just like with Bernie Sanders in 2016. He had an opportunity. There was Hillary Clinton's server. Boom, that's it. You've got here it is. It's an issue to hit her with. She had a homebrew server. She had, absolutely, she's supposed to be this big foreign policy experienced, wise person, and she has a homebrew server that anyone in the world would be able to hack. How can you trust her with the nation's secrets, which is what she's claiming, that you can trust her? It was an issue. Boom. It's a winning issue, and you should be able to win an election. And he blew it when he said, I'm not interested in your damn emails. He said, I'm just not interested in your damn emails. And then when he said that, Hillary Clinton kind of rushed over to him and shook his hand, knowing that he's a complete idiot and that he just simply lost a winning issue. Anyway, William Taylor says, how much time will the debate spend on Trump filling in forms wrong versus Biden? How much time will be spent on Trump filling in forms wrong versus Biden starting World War III? I'm guessing 10-1 ratio. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It'll all be about this conviction, this ridiculous conviction in New York. They're going to talk about that. World War III, no, because the Tapper and Bash, to the extent that they'll have any criticisms at all of Biden in Ukraine, is like, well, why haven't you done more? Why don't you send more weapons to Ukraine? Why and faster? What's holding up the arms train? And that'll give Biden the opportunity. Well, what's holding things up? It's those Republicans and Trump who held up the arms train. If only we'd provided them with more, as I wanted. I wanted that 61 billion sent right away. If only it had been sent faster and earlier, Ukraine would be in a much better position today. Biden's going to say this, and they're going to go to Trump. Hey, what do you have to say to that? You held up the arms train for Ukraine. And we'll see how Trump addresses that. If he says, "Well, no, 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 I gave everything to Ukraine. I was the one who started the sending the Javelin anti-tank missiles. It was Obama who only sent blankets and pillowcases. I sent these lethal weapons. So you can't accuse me of not doing more for Ukraine. I did so much for Ukraine. That's it. He's going to blow it." So again, Trump should never have agreed to this format. This is a format that works completely against him. He's going to be 3 against 1, and I think he's going to give away so much during the debate, things that will be held against him subsequently. So yeah, and let's. Go back. Yeah. So now William Taylor says, good one, George. British food is bad. Their prison food is even worse. I'm sure. I mean, if when you think, I mean, I used to eat this boiled cabbage. Now, you eat boiled cabbage, you know how disgusting that is. But that's what you get. Those were the school lunches. And I should say, that I went to a private school in England, which is like a fee-paying school. They're called public schools in England. So theoretically, the food that I was served should have been better than the food that you get in the state schools. And I tell you, it was just truly disgusting. Now, the prison food has to be worse than that. And to me, it's hard to imagine anything worse than those school lunches. So the puffiness of his face it testifies to just, I think, a bad diet. And then Summer Petrus, notice you're not telling me any longer that the days are not getting brutally short, but okay. What about Pocahontas? What are her odds for 2028? Well, there's going to be the question of age for her. I tend to think that by 2028, even Democrats are going to start looking for younger faces. She did very poorly in 2020 because, if you recall, there were very high expectations for her. People were thinking that she was going to push Bernie Sanders aside. I think she was going to show herself to be a much more appealing and formidable candidate than Sanders. She was really, I think, the front runner in 2020, and then it turned into an absolute fiasco. I mean, she went from one disaster after another with her attempt to do a blood test or a DNA test as to whether she had Indian blood, all of that, or Indian ancestry rather. That was a disaster, and it was just one fiasco after another. So, if you have your shot, you have a shot, and then you do that badly, and now you're going to be 8 years older. I have my doubts. Now, maybe, who knows? She'll improve drastically by then. But I'm not at all. I'm not sure. But on the other hand, as I say, I thought Buttigieg was terrible. But he seemed to do better than Warren. So. Cynthia says, George, you and others here might enjoy this. Trump and Biden go to a restaurant. Okay. Waitress, what will you have? Trump, steak medium rare. Waitress, and for the vegetable, Trump, the vegetable. All right, I'll say it again. All right. Trump and Biden go to a restaurant. Waitress, what will you have? Trump, steak medium rare. Waitress, and for the vegetable, Trump, the vegetable will have steak as well. You know, it's actually, I don't know, it's unkind, but it's actually very funny. And some of the best jokes are unkind, but it is funny. And for the vegetable will have steak as well. Anyway, Cynthia goes on. Just read, France announced a sale of 36 Caesar self-propelled howitzers to Armenia. Evidently, Azerbaijan and Russia have labeled the arms sales as provocative, with fears of sparking a potential third Kabbalah war as regional hostilities persist. Do you think these arms sales will cause the conflict there to get even more frostier than it already is? Yeah, I mean, I think so. It does. I mean, I mean, the problem is that Russia has essentially been pushed aside for a variety of reasons from that conflict in Armenia and Azerbaijan. I mean, Russia had been the broker, the peacemaker between the two states. Now, it is true that Russia had urged Armenia to make concessions on Nagorno-Karabakh. Armenia hadn't made those concessions. And then, there was this regime change in 2018 with Pashinyan, who was clearly, not a big fan of Russia. However, the problem still arises that this offensive that Azerbaijan mounted in 2020, that Armenia did very little to fight back. It provided very little resistance. But Russia didn't do anything to stop, and that was a real problem. That if you're going to be the honest broker, you're going to be the mediator, the local influential hegemon, which is what Russia was. Then you have to stop these things. You can't allow one side just to mount an offensive, which leads to a massive, humiliating defeat for the other side. And then Armenia was bound to then turn against Russia. And I think that the offensive earlier this year, which had basically brought Nagorno-Karabakh to an end, essentially sealed once and for all the Russia-Armenia relationship. Now, again, why Pashinyan decided not to resist in any way, it just baffles me why he just essentially gave the green light for Azerbaijan to mount this offensive. Something was going to happen, was going to end in disaster. I don't know, but once that happened, and once Russia really didn't do anything to stop this, and again, the Collective Security Treaty Organization didn't do anything to help Armenia. So irrespective of Pashinyan's inadequacies and his amazing failures of leadership, nonetheless, Russia as the local hegemon didn't do anything. So now Armenia has done probably what Pashinyan always intended to do, which is to turn to the West. And these arms sales, and I'm sure there are going to be other arms sales, and obviously Armenia will leave the Collective Security Treaty Organization. I mean, there's no reason for it to stay on. So, I mean, it's already boycotting the meeting, so I'm sure it's going to leave. Will this act as a trigger for further war, or will this act as a deterrent against Azerbaijan? I think probably it will act as a deterrent, but I don't know, because I don't think Azerbaijan really wants to press ahead with some of its more ambitions. I mean, it's already claimed that Yerevan, the Armenian capital, actually is an Azeri city. I don't think they're going to push for that. then the question is whether they will try to link the two parts of Azerbaijan across Armenian territory. Well, that could be problematic. I mean, because that could certainly bring in Western powers on Armenia's side. With this, obviously this the howitzers, and I'm assuming they're going to be more arms sales. But there's also the question of Iran, and Iran isn't going to accept such a naked power grab by Azerbaijan. I mean, Iran and Azerbaijan have a long-standing conflict, and this massive increase in Azerbaijan's relative power, not to mention its alliance with Turkey, is going to cause a great deal of anxiety in Iran. So I think that's going to add some caution to what Azerbaijan will do. But yeah, I think what that tells us, that French arms sale, then I think there's going to be more, is I think Russia's declining influence. I don't want to. No, it's not a good thing to contemplate, but Russia clearly is declining in influence in the Caucasus. This was something that this was Russia's backyard. This is where Russia's writ, went, and people had to do what Russia dictated. That's gone, and there could be further changes, detrimental to Russia. In Kazakhstan, these people in Kazakhstan, they are no Russophiles. And I thought that, again, if you listen to that hoax conversation with David Cameron, and that Cameron is talking to he thinks he's talking to Poroshenko, and he said, well, I was in Kazakhstan recently, and the Kazakh leaders, all expressed very anti-Russian sentiments. Now, I don't know whether that's necessarily true. Maybe Cameron heard what he wanted to hear. But it's not inconsistent with other things that we've come across, which is that Kazakhstan, even though it's a member of the Collective Security Treaty Organization, even though it's part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, is making nice with the United States, is making nice with NATO. And again, Russian influence is diminishing in Kazakhstan. And again, this is due to a distinct policy pursued by Tokayev and the Kazakh leadership, that they are deliberately diminishing the Russian presence in Kazakhstan. The use of the Russian language. They're making life difficult for the Russians who live there. There's a large Russian population. So you could see, places like Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, where Russian influence will start to disappear. So this is, but anyway, thank you, Cynthia, and thank you for this link about Armenia and Azerbaijan. And then Marty asked, did you watch Tucker Carlson's news conference? Yes, I did. Very, very well done. He is very good as a public speaker. He's very entertaining. And there were some classic to-dos that he had with with some of the Australian journalists who started doing the usual media stuff. And one of it, which was that, she said, "Oh, you have been, you, Tucker Carlson, have been a major purveyor of the replacement theory, whereby white people are being replaced by colored people." And then, of course, he said, you know, you were quite wrong. You know, I've never said that. You know, that's you just, you know, you're lying that I have ever said that. No, no, you've said this. And I said, no, I've never said it's a matter of white people. I said that native-born Americans are being replaced by imported people. And then so you know, he was kind of admonished her, and then she said, well, you know, what about the shooter in Buffalo? Don't you feel responsible for the shooter in Buffalo who also adhered to this replacement theory? And of course, you know, then, you know, you thought, you know, you first of all lied about that I ever said that the matter is white people being replaced by colored people. And then you talk of nonsense that somehow some crazy nutcase with a gun, and I'm responsible for that he went off and started killing people. This is, he said, this is typical of what journalists do. They distort something and then they accuse you of being responsible. And so you know, that was all very. And then of course, so do you favor gun control? You know, that's it. Boom. They've all got their talking points. Oh, do you favor gun control? So absolutely, you know, non sequiturs. You know, oh yeah. So you're a racist. You inspire loonies to go off and engage in mass shootings. Oh, and you're not in favor of gun control. And so he said, yeah. So I noticed that Australian journalists are very much like American journalists, and I think that's true. I think these kind of journalists are pretty much the same the world over. It's like I say, people always assume that, oh, you're in Hungary, you got Viktor Orban. Oh, it's very sensible. So it must be that the Hungarians are very sensible people. No. You know, you live in Budapest. People in Budapest mouth the same cliches that they mouth in London. They mouth the same cliches that they mouth in Paris, in New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and of course in Canberra. And you know, so it's, you know, the same people are around the world over. They all have the same banal, cliched ideas, and it's just, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you're in Canberra, whether you're in Budapest, you know, London, wherever. I suspect there are a number of those people in Moscow as well. So it's not a matter of nationalities and nations. It's a particular class of people, and this class of people have the same set of ideas. But it was very entertaining, that news conference, and it's well worth watching, because I think Tucker Carlson really is masterful in the way he handles questions. I mean, he's entertaining, and he, you know, he's a good public speaker. I'd say he's a very good public speaker. Anyway, Dan Rock says, but did Putin force you to take the jab? That was very funny, because he was talking about how Putin is this terrible person. You know, we'll have to worry about Putin, and said, well, why do we, whether living in America or in Australia, why do we worry about Putin? What has Putin done to us? Did Putin force you to take the jab? And that's really the point, that, you know, everyone's obsessing about what Putin's doing, but the problems that we have come from the leaders that we have, the politicians that we have. They're the ones who have done these terrible things to us. I mean, what Putin is doing in Russia or in Ukraine, that's nothing to do with us. It doesn't affect our lives in any way. And I think that was such a brilliant point. Did Putin force you to take the jab? Yeah, he didn't do any of that. Now, admittedly, Putin has not exactly been in the forefront of the anti-vax movement, contrary to the stupid articles you read in the New York Times. And again, it's true, Putin has not been anti-globalist. He's not been a great champion of individual liberties and not taking the vax and so on. In fact, the Russians were, you know, all gung-ho for the vaccine and everything else. And they had all these IDs with what are those things called? The what are the others? I forgot the name. That you're supposed to show, whether you've had the vaccine or not. So anyway, so he wasn't a great champion of the anti-vaxxers, but nonetheless, he wasn't the one who forced us to take the jab. Anyway, then Marty provides the link to the Tucker interview. And then Robert says, great one. Cynthia reminds me of the mock political bumper sticker, Biden Fetterman 2024. It's a no-brainer. That's a really good one. These are good jokes. I thought the one about the vegetable was a good joke. But that's a good one. I haven't seen that one about Biden Fetterman. The one with the vegetable is, I've heard that joke before, not specifically about Biden, but I think I've heard it, in other contexts. That it's a good joke whenever you hear it. But I haven't heard this one, Biden Fetterman 2024. It's a no-brainer. And then Summer Petro says, I agree Trump should characterize the Ukraine war as Biden's war, and also link it to the crack-handed withdrawal from Afghanistan just prior to the Ukraine war. I'm sure he'll do that. All right, let's go back then to the YouTube page and see if we can answer some of the questions raised by the YouTubers. And as I always say, if you're joining us through YouTube, it would be great if you could join our locals community, become a subscriber, and then help us do our work. And it's well worth it. I mean, you get excellent content, and as you can see, we have excellent people making excellent observations, and I'm always learning so much from Gagglers. So, if you're joining us through YouTube, just please, join our locals community at thegaggle.locals.com. Anyway, Rail Fanning points 2.0 says there's so much cope among GOP talking heads saying how Trump will win a rigged debate. They're either dishonest or dumb. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think I don't think Trump is a particularly effective debater. He's not focused enough. And think, and again, if you go back to 2020, the same people were convinced that Trump was going to wipe the floor with Biden. He didn't. Now, I don't think that first debate was quite as bad for Trump as other people have made out, but it wasn't great. I think that was largely Chris Wallace's fault. He handled the debate badly, but it wasn't the expectation he was going to wipe the floor with Biden was silly. He was never going to do it. Biden is, he's quite cunning. And again, I recall in 2012, he won that debate against Paul Ryan. Admittedly, Ryan was very ineffective, but he won that debate. And if you recall, Biden was such a disgusting, slimy liar. He said to Ryan, I was opposed to the Iraq war. I was opposed to the Iraq war. And Ryan, who should have seized on that, says, you liar. You were in favor of the war. You were a big champion of the war. You supported that war. He just sat there like a dummy and didn't challenge Biden. And Biden was allowed to get away with making a claim. I was against the Iraq war. God, if Republicans are going to be that useless, then it's no, why not just stop competing in elections? Just give hand power right away to the Democrats. So then, and then Rail Fanning Point says 25% of Republican women voters oppose a complete abortion ban. Case in point, Alabama state Republicans lost a state steel in the Huntsville, Alabama district of the Democrats. No, I take your point, and that's why I think Trump will just simply should do the straightforward thing. Hey, it's not a It's not up to me. I don't want a federal ban. I don't want any kind of federal legislation regulating abortion. I think it's up to the states. Let the states decide whether one state will have more restrictions. Another state will have fewer restrictions. But it's not up to me. I don't want to get involved in this debate. And I think that would be the sensible thing. Just so I'm not going to get involved in this issue. I mean, and he said oppose a complete abortion ban, but Trump opposes a complete abortion ban. And of course, a lot of Republicans do favor a complete abortion ban, but Trump isn't one of them. Trump was given the famous 3 exceptions. Ben Todt, the Hungarian, said, your state, good evening. I know it's separate, but do you think Hungary and Meloni can stop Ursula von der Leyen on the Lugan second appointment at the current Brussels summit, or are we doomed in Europe? Yeah, we're doomed. It cannot be stopped. Ursula von der Leyen will indeed be nominated, and the European Parliament will support her. I don't think anything can stop it. It's kind of interesting, though, that some of the other jobs that that are being doled out, one of which is our friend Kaja Kallas, the demented Estonian prime minister, who is to be the new Josep Borrell. She will be the new foreign policy chief. So we're going to have a foreign policy chief who is absolutely demented in her hatred of the Russia. So that's going to be the spokesperson on behalf of the EU. So you can imagine the raving that will emanate from her. But that seems like a done deal. Kaja Kallas will be the foreign policy chief of the EU. And then Justin Maverick says tonight will be the biggest nothing ever. Yeah, well, that's fair. Well, I'm going to post a on the locals page a live chat, so we can watch the debate in real time, and then people can present their own thoughts on how the debate is going. I agree. I don't think it's going to be very much. As I say, I'm a pessimist, and I think it'll be a good night for Biden. It just, I think he's prepared. He's obviously been preparing for a week. Trump doesn't prepare. That's not how he's wired. And I don't think that's the way to go. I think these types of situations, you need to prepare, because you need to know how they're gonna turn off the mic. What are you gonna do when he turns off the mic? What are you gonna do when Biden accuses you of lying about something? So you gotta don't just try to wing it and figure out what's going to happen. This is a format that is very unfavorable to Trump, and therefore I think he needs to prepare and have responses, at hand for what happens when they turn his microphone off, and what happens when Biden starts throwing around lies about him. Anyway, so. We have land, air, and sea machines. Hello from Ireland. I'm so happy that we have friends in Ireland. That's always good. It's so nice to know that. And Ben Todt says Biden's a carcass, but his team is crafty and rather ruthless. Absolutely, absolutely. And he himself, I think, is crafty and ruthless. So absolutely never underestimate. I think the Fox News people are ridiculously underestimating him. I think he's nothing if not very cunning bastard. That's how he survived all these years. 1972, he was elected to the Senate in 1972, the year Richard Nixon was elected president. Rail Fanning says Trump isn't a real nationalist. He's no Pat Buchanan. Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, I do think he he's not he's not really an intellectual. Pat Buchanan was an intellectual. Trump, I think, just I mean, you know, almost from the beginning of his, I guess, his not so much his real estate career, but his career as being a kind of a public figure, he did embrace a kind of nationalist economic policy. I mean, I think he's always been a protectionist, and I think he's always thought that government should be in the business of protecting American industries. I think that is a part of it. I think he has also been a skeptic of American foreign entanglements. I think he's never really supported. He never, back in 2000, he wanted to pull out of NATO, so he's never particularly favored NATO. You know, so yeah, I mean, he in a way, I mean, he is an America firster. He's not, but I think on immigration, he's been all over the place, and that's, I think, you know, has connection with his business. His businesses do rely on cheap labor, and so, you know, he's been all over the place when it comes to immigration. But, you know, he's not an intellectual. He's not someone who's thought out his positions as the way Buchanan has done, and I think that when he ran in 2015, he kind of put together a package of ideas almost on the fly. I think he didn't quite know which way he was going to go. He probably didn't even think that he had any chance of winning. Nobody thought he had any chance of winning. Then I think when he realized that, you know, his campaign was taking off, he then started putting things together. But I mean, I think on those issues of trade and skepticism about foreign entanglements, I think he's been fairly consistent. You know, like it goes back to his positions in the 1990s. Hugh Keenan says, Underground 1995, George, any chance of subtitles? Well, I don't know, because I'd like to post it, but somebody explained the subtitles come with a different file. So the moment you upload it onto locals, you lose it because it's a different file. And I've tried to play around uploading the file, but it didn't succeed. I don't know. Maybe I could try doing it on Rumble, see if it works. I mean, it obviously doesn't work on locals, but I can see if maybe it works on Rumble, and then we can have a screening of Underground on Rumbles. I'll try that. I think the name Smiley, as in George Smiley, is that perhaps a British version of the name? Yeah, I don't think so. You know, somebody actually brought up the name of the guy in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, Toby Esterhazy. That was a Hungarian name, and of course it is true. Esterhazy is a famous Hungarian name, a famous Hungarian aristocrat, Esterhazy. And it is very funny that one of the characters in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, the completely ineffectual Toby Esterhazy, had a Hungarian name. It was not really explained why he had a Hungarian name, but he did have a Hungarian name. But I don't think Smiley has anything to do with, you know, I don't know, Samuele. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Coop W says Assange might know where the Nazis are hiding. Yeah, I don't know. Michael says, Morris says, yes, Assange more or less got the modern Gulag treatment or Siberian exile. Yeah, I agree. And then Rail Phoenix says, Trump continues to display weakness and incompetence. No 4D chess. I mean, I think he's trying to coast. and for instance, freedom should be, the free press and everything should be an issue that works for him. He says, look, Biden's the enemy of the free press. And Trump, has suffered from government interference with social media. He was kicked off Twitter. He hardly ever brings that up. I mean, this was a terrible thing that was done to him. He was kicked off Twitter. He was the incumbent sitting president of the United States, and Twitter kicked him off. And he never really talks about that. And that was obviously done in cahoots with the Biden people. And yet, he just lets it go. And I mean, I think it's a huge issue that should work to his advantage, irrespective of the mediocre ruling of the Supreme Court by Amy Coney Barrett. Terrible, stupid ruling. But even so, he doesn't have to abide by the ruling. He said, no, I mean, we want free media, and the Biden administration has intervened and interfered with journalism. Yeah. Now, some people are bringing up the issue of these documents. I think that's a very significant. So it really wasn't true when they said, oh, there are no conditions attached to his release. Well, yeah, there were conditions. He had to destroy unspecified documents or hand them over to the U.S. government. So therefore, this was a big deal. There had to have been a reason why the U.S. government insisted on these documents being destroyed. Remember, not any of the stuff that he's already posted. We know all the stuff that's posted, that's already out there. So it's obviously something that hasn't been posted. And they said you have to destroy. So even the Vault 7, all that Vault 7 stuff, that was all been done. That's all been posted. So this is 20,000, I think it's 20,000 documents of stuff that he hasn't posted and that they wanted to see destroyed. I think it is about the Trump, the DNC emails. And James Antowarto, he was in solitary confinement, which means you're allowed 1 hour and 1 hour and 24 for a little walk. That's that means he must have been exercising in his cell. Yeah, I mean, I think that I think he didn't look like he had much opportunity to do much in the way of exercise. But I'm sure he did that in the embassy. He found ways to exercise in the embassy. When he was using his rollerblading and all the rest. So I'm sure he found some ways of exercising in his cell. Maybe doing push-ups and so on. I mean, but I doubt whether he had much of a chance to do weightlifting. So I'm just reading. It's these letters are so small, so it's hard to and on the Rumble page, it's white against a black background, which I always find extremely difficult to read. I don't know why they have it like that. Matthew Cirque, you're talking about Hillary and her emails. Her server could have been hacked. Was it? I don't know. I'm assuming that if it's a homebrew server, it would have been hacked. Um, but I don't know. The I mean, given that she lost in 2016, there was really very little incentive for anyone to disclose any unflattering information about her subsequently. I mean, if she'd become president, that would have been a different case. But I have to assume that she's State Department. This is homebrew server. I mean, it's the easiest thing in the world to hack it. All right. Michael says, I think a little pessimistic, RE loss of influence, considering Russia's confirming its superpower position versus NATO. Humans are often guided by who actually comes out on top, serial fence sitters. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess they're making their decision, which is that they're not worrying too much about Russia. I'm talking about Armenia, Azerbaijan, Serbia, Kazakhstan. These are kind of traditional Russian allies who don't seem to be too worried about keeping in with Russia. That may be a foolish step to take, but as at the moment, they don't seem to be too worried about any consequences for them by doing this. I mean, particularly in the case of Serbia, when Serbia really has very few friends other than Russia. Anyway. Warwick Hunt says the presidential debate will be about who loves Israel the most. That will play a part in it. But as I say, I don't think they'll talk that much about Israel because I think Israel is an issue that will work to Trump's advantage. And I don't think they'll give him the opportunity. Michael says, George, any idea why Dostoevsky used a rather anachronistic phrase, went to Coventry in the possessed, apparently written some 80 years before I don't know what that word is. Well, I mean, you're talking about, I'm assuming you're reading a translation. So they translated it, went into Coventry, said because they were trying to find the English phrase that corresponded most closely to the Russian phrase. But yeah, I mean, that Dostoevsky didn't write in English; he wrote in Russian. So, so you're reading a translation, and I mean, a lot of these, these novels, and I don't know which translation you read. They're not great translations. At least some of the earlier translations that were of Tolstoy and Dostoevsky were not great translations. They were written by people who were enthusiasts and who didn't necessarily know the Russian language that well, like Constance Garnett, and I forgot the one. Was it Magashak, the one who did Dostoevsky, David Magashak. So again, they were enthusiasts, but they didn't know Russian well enough to be able to to translate it properly. But some of the more recent ones I think are better. I think that that people who really know the Russian language. But whenever you read these translations, you realize just how awkward this is. Even if you don't know Russian, you think they couldn't have said that because it just doesn't sound like anything. In English that just sounds so weird. So then they're not able really to come up with an expression that would be the equivalent of the phrase in Russian. Anna Marie, always good to see you. Thank you, Anna Marie. Um, hmm, hmm. Michael says, I like the Toby Esterhazy character. He was sneaky, but so were most people in that series. I agree with you. I think everyone was they're kind of very unappealing. Everyone was very unappealing. I guess other than George Smiley himself, but everyone else was pretty unattractive. Um, Anne Marie says, George, back to the Tuesday chat. I agree. You easily look like a music teacher. Oh, that's good. And your hair looks pretty much like Beethoven's. Oh, this is very good. But I think your expression looks much friendlier than his. Okay, well, that's good. I mean, obviously, I'm not a towering genius, to say the least, the way Beethoven was. But it is very funny with Beethoven why all of the paintings of him always had him in this very grim, furious look in his face, kind of a ferocious expression. And I can, in some of his symphonies, you can see, okay, well, if you listen to his symphonies, and then you can see, well, how would I paint the composer of this sort of music? And then you paint him like that with this brooding, fierce expression on his face. But not everything he wrote was brooding and tormented and fierce. Some of it was really quite pretty and very, very, very humane. But I mean, yeah. But yeah. But anyway, thank you. thank you for even talking about me in the same breath as Beethoven. Cynthia asked, do you think Glenn Greenwald might have those documents you're talking about? No, I don't think so, because Greenwald only had the Snowden documents. I don't think Assange ever passed on any of the documents to Greenwald. But even let's say these documents exist, and let's say there are copies somewhere, and WikiLeaks has those copies. I just don't think Assange is going to take the risk of disclosing material that was in those documents, having given his word to the U.S. government, having they extracted from him this affidavit saying, yeah, I've given back these documents, I've destroyed whatever I had. He said that before a judge, and I can't see him daring to violate it and say, oh yeah, I just I lied to the U.S. government. Here are the documents. And not if you want to stay alive. That is, I mean, if you intend to stay alive and watch your little children grow up into adulthood, and I assume that's what he wants to do, then I wouldn't take those chances. I'd say that the subject is closed. Because I think the U.S. government will be take it very amiss if you were to disclose this information. Now, of course, the other thing about the FOIA, that the pledge he made that he wouldn't make any kind of a FOIA application to find out about the legal judicial proceedings against him that went on for years and years. Somebody else can do that, even if Assange, will not do it himself. Others could make FOIA applications. He can't bind others on those FOIA applications. But in terms of these WikiLeaks documents, I think they're gone. I don't think we'll ever find that out. Then Hugh Keenan says, $1 billion brain or Dr. Strangelove for me, BDB. Oh yeah, there's Bob Dylan. Stands up to current scrutiny. Better, great acting, better characters on screen. I think Doctor Strangelove was a masterpiece. We had the screening on the Gaggle recently. $1 billion brain, I'm not sure stands up particularly well. I mean, I don't think. What's the name of the guy? The author, the one who did $1 Billion Brain. He did the Ipcress, Len Dayton. He did the Ipcress File and Funeral in Berlin. I think. I mean, Funeral in Berlin wasn't a bad film. The Ipcress File I thought was incomprehensible. But I don't think they're in any way. I don't think he's as good as Le Carré. I thought it was always a poor man's Le Carré. But I think some of those films from the 1960s, they're quite entertaining, and we've shown some of them here at the Gaggle, and they're well worth watching. So I wouldn't mind showing doing a screening of Funeral in Berlin, and maybe the Quiller Memorandum. Yeah, maybe that we could have that. What do you think, Cynthia? We could have that as a theme of films set in Berlin, Cold War Berlin. That could be themes for that. So we could have The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. We could have Funeral in Berlin, the Quiller Memorandum. That's 3 right away. I'm sure we can come up with another 2, 3 films set in Berlin, Cold War Berlin. And then Cynthia, and then Perus asked me, what do you think of the documentaries of the great late John Pilger? I think very highly of him. Yeah, he's very, 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 very talented, very decent man. No, I think very highly of him. And then Cynthia says, sorry for the dumb question. I believe I was thinking about the documents that Edward Snowden has, which Greenwald has a copy of as well. Well, I guess so. But Greenwald really, completely ruled it out. He said that, that's it. He's done with that. He's disclosed everything that he wanted to disclose, everything he was authorized to disclose, and he's not going to disclose anymore. I'm also not sure exactly who has ownership of those documents, whether it's Greenwald or whether it's, what's his name, the Omidyar, because it may be that part of the deal when Greenwald went to work for Omidyar on the Intercept, part of the deal was that Omidyar takes over ownership of the Snowden material. So maybe Greenwald doesn't even own the Snowden material anymore. Maybe Omidyar owns it. So Omidyar is not going to disclose any of it. But I remember Greenwald was asked about this several times, about these documents, and he said, he's done with that. He has no interest in any further disclosures. I mean, everything that's of public interest, he has disclosed. So I don't think that we're ever going to get anywhere with that. Alice in Cleveland, in Cleverland, that's good. Seth Rich downloaded the Hillary files, was not hacked by anyone. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's, that Assange is basically going to go with that secret to his grave. Paul Meany says, George has always been a pleasure and a delight to see since day one of Julian's incarceration. You and Peter relentlessly speaking up for him, together with George Galloway too. God bless you all. Thank you so much. But to be fair, many others did as well. I spoke, at that London conference on his behalf. So no, I mean, I think he's a wholly admirable figure, and what he's had to endure is quite extraordinary. And then Challenges says, 1974, Once Upon a Time in America, great movie. Yeah, that's something we could, that's definitely we think about, Once Upon a Time in America. I don't even mind that film, Once Upon a Time in the West, which I quite like. The one film, I think, when Henry Fonda played a very sinister, creepy, evil person. So anyway. Then Stephen Carter asks, why did Assange, when he started WikiLeaks in 2006, say that there was nothing to investigate regarding 9/11, a very deep state stand to hold to? I don't know. Is that what he said? Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember that. I'll look that up. I didn't know he had said that. But I mean, he you know, he's a publisher, so he publishes whatever material that comes his way. So I think if material about 9/11 came his way, then I think he would have published it. I mean, so I don't know what he meant by that, but maybe he's just, he hasn't seen any material in 2006 that, like official government material. I mean, he publishes, I think, official documents, but anything that was worth publishing. I mean, there are obviously the stuff that the U.S. government has, which it hasn't published. The Saudi connection that still hasn't seen the light of day. But I guess Assange hasn't come across those documents. No one has. I mean, the U.S. government has kept it very secret. Anyway, Hewkin says Dr. Strangelove too heavy-handed. Brilliant brain, slippery and fun. Okay, well, I mean, everybody has his own taste. Yeah, it's interesting. Interesting that you go against the consensus, which is always good. Maybe I'll take another look. Maybe I miss something. Anyway, so I think my time is is long past due. We got off to a very rocky start today. I don't know what happened. It wasn't my fault. I think it was Rumble's fault, but we managed to rectify it. And then Dan Rock says, I loved Once Upon a Time in the West. The opening 20 minutes of class. Do you ever plan a Western poll? Yeah, I think so. I think we're gonna. We have done a Western. We did Unforgiven. I can't remember whether we did a poll or Western, but I think we'll pick on a number of Westerns. I think Once Upon a Time in the West, obviously, but I think that some of the classic Westerns in the past, the Gunfight at the OK Corral. We can pick on half a dozen great Westerns, and then we'll have a poll on that. So yeah, I think that's a very good idea. I think we'll definitely do that. Anyway, my time is up. Thank you, everybody who's joined me. Thank you for all the excellent questions and ideas and suggestions. Really, really interesting. Thank you above all to the generous contributors. It's what keeps us on the road. And then I have to explain myself to those two bastards who really despise me. Think that I do nothing. So tomorrow, that's my ordeal, and so we will be back next Tuesday, same time, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Have a great weekend. We will, of course, have podcasts over the weekend. We'll do the live stream on Monday, and see you next week. All the best. Good night. Bye-bye. Oh, by the way, we're going to have the live chat of the debate. It starts at 9 p.m. Eastern time, but I'm going to post on the locals board a live chat. So I want everybody to come in, join, tell they're all a bunch of idiots. Whatever, fine, come in, join. We'll have some fun. So see you in a few hours tonight. Okay, all the best. Bye-bye.